So let me start off by showing you the budget that we approved, the Vestry approved in fiscal year or calendar year 2020. And also you'll see the results of the calendar year 19 on the document that you should have on your screen. The church works like a normal business does. We have to generate our own revenues. We have to create our own way of paying for everything that we have. And we don't really receive any government support, and we've received little to none support from the diocese considered financially. So we have to generate everything that we do. Let me tell you a little bit about the revenues and how they are broken up. So about 16% of our revenues come from different areas like contracts that we have with East Carolina University. So ECU actually leases the organ from us and actually brings their students over for training. We receive in that 16% money for the food pantry, and then we also do things like fundraising with that. We have another 8% of our money that comes from foundations like the Hooker Memorial Foundation. We also receive every year some funds from the Legacy Fund and also from the Huber Fund. And then the other monies that we receive in the foundations is from ECMAF. And all of those are a percentage of the revenues that they have that they provide us each year. And then the rest of our money is really from pledge and plate revenues. That's 76% of our budget. Now, pledge revenues are the bulk of that. And plate revenue, as you see the plate coming over on a Sunday morning when it comes around, that's what that money is. It's the plate portion of it. But if we didn't have the contributions from the parishioners in pledge and plate revenue, we would not be able to survive. So it's very important for us. 76% of our money comes from that. Now, where do the expenses go? So each year we sit down with our staff and our clergy and talk about what we need, and we develop a budget. 62% of our budget is for salaries and benefits for our clergy and staff. Now, interestingly, that in a employee-centric business is kind of low. In my business, I'm about 80% in salaries and benefits for my people, and in most of the businesses that are people-centric, you're going to see somewhere in the 80%. So the fact that we got 35% of our money going to other areas is a really good thing. About 17% of it is related to office expenses and building expenses. And when I talk about that, I'm talking about when you come into the church, you want to make sure that air conditioning's running, that it's cool in there. And in the wintertime, you want to make sure it's warm. So we've got to be able to pay for those expenses to be able to have a nice temperature for you in there. Plus, we want to make sure the lights are on every time you come into the church. So it's expensive for us to actually keep those kind of things up, but we need those monies to be able to do that. We have about 9% of our money that goes to program funds. Now, I told you a little earlier that we got the staff all in the salaries and benefits, but to be able to do the things that we need to do in Christian education, youth, newcomers, parish life, and worship, we've got to have funds to actually be able to do those things. So every year we prepare a budget that actually has money being spent in each of those areas. One of our really big things that we do is the food pantry. About 5% of our expenses go to the food pantry. And then we have got to support our diocese. As I told you a little earlier, we really don't receive any revenue from the diocese, but we have to help them out. The normal process is to give about 10% of your revenue. We're struggling a little bit to do that. Right now we're providing about 7% of our revenue to the diocese. We would love to be able to increase that over time, and hopefully one of these days we'll do that. Let me talk a little bit about the restricted funds, because I'm sure people have heard that we've got quite a bit of money in the restricted fund account. And right now we do. We've got about $1.2 million in that account. But about 75% of that, or $870,000, is in the Legacy Fund and the Huber Fund. And those are pretty much restricted for those type of things. As I said earlier, on the revenue side, we do get contributions from the Legacy Fund and the Huber Fund on a yearly basis. So they give us a percentage of whatever those total dollars are, and that helps us to balance the budget. The other 25% of it is in restricted accounts that are really things that people want to give to actually have activities happen. And let me give you a few examples of that. So like the Backpack Buddies, the Canoga trip that our youth take, the Altar Guild Fund, the Flower Guild Fund, and the Host and Helpers. All of those people in our community or our parishioners will give to those areas, and they want to make sure that those funds are going to pay for those expenses. For example, the Flower Guild. We've got people in our parish that give just to the Flower Guild. They want to make sure that they see flowers in our church on every Sunday. So that's what those funds are used for. And let me talk a little bit about our capital reserves, because that's another important piece of it. And plus, we also do budget for that every year also. Now, it would be nice if we were able to budget on a 3-year, 5-year type plan, but we're not quite there yet. We've got to generate some additional revenues to be able to get to there. We use our capital reserve fund to pay for expenses that we don't put in the budget. Some examples of that are like our choir room. It needs to have the carpet and the floors and the cabinets replaced. We really don't have any money in the budget for that, so as each year goes by, if we have reserves left over, like you'll see in fiscal year 19 or calendar year 19, we take those monies and put into the capital reserve account and then use it the following year to pay for things like that. We need to replace the HVAC unit, the air conditioning system in the chapel. We need to replace the carpet in the chapel. We've got a broken font in the chapel. Those things need money. And the only way we can do it is to generate money into that capital reserve account. So that's why we need a capital reserve account constantly. You'll see things like we are replacing the siding out between the chapel and the house. And so those monies are coming out of that capital fund too. So those are all important for us. On a monthly basis, I prepare a treasurer's report to the Vestry. And you will see that coming up on your screen. And that is how I explain to the Vestry what has happened during a particular month for our financials. And it keeps them kind of apprised of where we are financially based on budget, where we are in designated funds, where we are in capital reserve funds, and where we may have issues that we need to address. So we've had cases where we've had needs that are not in the existing budget, operating budget, or in the capital reserve budget. So what normally happens is that is initially coming from the staff to the management committee. The management committee discusses it, determines if it's something that needs to be done, and figures out where the money's coming from. Sometimes it's in additional revenues that we have in the operating budget or additional capital reserve that we've not expended yet. If we decide we need to do it, we take it to the Vestry with a proposal, a motion from the management committee, and then the Vestry makes the last decision on if we're going to do it or not. A prime example is during this pandemic, we have done all of our services pretty much virtually. And if you've watched it, they're not the best coming through because our fiber optic is not the best. So we need to upgrade our fiber optic. At this past Vestry meeting in September, we brought forward to the Vestry a plan that the management committee approved to replace the fiber optic system here. Now that's going to cost us money, but we're going to expend it over a 3-year period. What the Vestry agreed to do is spend the capital portion of it now, and we've got money this year in the operating budget, and then we'll spend the rest of it over the next 3 years, but it's not going to cost us any more money. It's the same money we were spending before. And each year we have to have our financials reviewed by an auditor. The diocese provides a diocesan contract auditor who comes in every year and actually will review our financials. And I can tell you very happily that our diocesan auditor for the last 2 years has said our financial paperwork and the way we do it is very, very good. In fact, he's taken pictures of some of the things that we've done and actually taken those to other dioceses. So we're very pleased, and you'll see on your screen the latest audit report, which is for the year 2019, and you'll see in there that he says that our paperwork is very good. So we're thankful for that. And I do have to say that if it weren't for Diane, I don't know that we would be having those successes, but she's done a very good job to keep us clean in our reporting. So in order to create a budget and have it ready for January 1st, you've got to start early. So what I normally do is I meet with the clergy and staff in September and October, find out what their needs are. During the year, things will happen and they will say, well, I want to start a program up and it's going to cost this. So I need to know early how much we're going to need to spend so that I can tell the vestry and the annual commitment campaign committee how much money we need. So this year we're talking about $750,000. We know we're going to have expenses somewhere around $935,000. The rest of that is those foundations and all those other things that we talked about earlier. But if we don't get the $750,000, we've got to start cutting the budget in some manner, because we've got to have a balanced budget. We cannot go into the year with a budget that has a loss in it. So it's important for us to kind of know well before January 1st how much we're going to get in so that we can make the cuts before it happens. If for some reason you actually get your budget finished after January, and let's say it's the middle of January or the latter part of January, you've already lost 1 month where you can make those cuts. So it's important for us to really have that budget finished. Plus, when the vestry goes on their vestry retreat in early January, I've got to present the final budget to them, and so I want to have it ready by the end of December so we're not trying to rush around January to get it done. So we had in the expenses this year that we really wanted to buy this property on 3rd Street. Is that right? 3rd Street. 311 3rd Street. So we actually placed that in the capital reserve budget this year. It cost us about $75,000. We needed about $25,000 to actually demolish the house and level the land. And eventually we're going to put a gravel parking lot on it until we have enough money to build a building there. But we had to have those monies available, so it's part of the capital reserve fund that was approved by the budget and approved by the vestry this year that actually created those monies. So we were ready to go as soon as that house was ready to be bought, and that's where we got those funds from. In calendar year 2020, we had less than 200 pledging units. I think on the number you'll see 195, and that was as of January 20th, right before we went to the vestry retreat. I think we got 1 or 2 more, so we had still less than 200, and the average was about $3,700 per pledging unit, and that's where we got the $750,000 from. So I've been at St. Paul's for 11 years, and Cindy and I just love this church. And we want this church to continue to grow. We want to see more things happening around here. We want to see our facilities grow. And we can't do that, as I said earlier, unless our parish gives to the church. As y'all heard earlier, foundations are great, but we need those foundations, the Legacy Fund and the Huber Fund, for our future generation. And right now there's really not enough money in that to actually do what we want to do. We need new buildings at some point in time. We need a very nice set of offices for our staff. We need probably another parish hall with a athletic type facility in it. But you can't do any of that unless the parishioners give to the church. So that's one of the reasons Cindy and I give to our church.